I carried a silver bucket past chandeliers that cost 30 grand to pretend they were crystal, while a woman with a clipboard told a man to move an orchid 6 inches left. Pacific Heights, Thursday night. Money everywhere, pretending to be air. They called me Maggie. Rubber-soled shoes, cotton dress, invisible. What they didn't know? I'm Margaret Hale, 62, ex-Wall Street risk analyst. I spent 30 years counting how things fail, and profiting when they did. Then I retired, came west, and bought a certain pale stucco mansion through a trust with a forgettable name. The people renting it, Vivian and Peter Drummond, throw parties the way some people throw tantrums, loud, expensive, and for an audience. I took a job cleaning their home because I'm writing a book about who we are when we think no one's looking. Tonight is their gala, venture money, magazine smiles, a band that sounds like nostalgia with better lighting. And then, right on schedule, the part where beautiful rooms show their cracks. A bracelet goes missing. Security is told to check the staff's bags. Mine, Luis the chef's, Naya the student's. We unzip our lives while a room full of generous people toast honesty. Wrong room, wrong woman. Because the person they're frisking for a trinket owns the deed. In 10 minutes, I'll walk into that library, take the mic, and tell 90 power players exactly who I am and what decency costs when it's cheap. The band will change songs, the air will change sides, and a house that runs on performance will learn what it means to hold. My name is Margaret Hale. I bring the water, I keep the receipts, and tonight I turn on the lights. 2 days before the gala, Vivian called a staff meeting. She stood in the kitchen in white again and held a glass like a baton. Lacey beside her had a stack of clipboards. The florist's assistant was crying silently in the corner with his phone face down on the counter. Someone had ruined a centerpiece somewhere and was apologizing from a van. Vivian cleared her throat. "Okay, team," she said, which is how some people say staff when they want to borrow your dignity. Saturday is important. There will be press. There will be heavy hitters. There will be people who can change lives with a phone call. I need everything seamless. No one asks guests any questions. No one lingers in any rooms. We want our friends to feel like the house runs on air. I do not know if anyone else noticed the next part. Perhaps it is a kind of experience like catching a shift in the weather before the clouds confess it. Vivian said, "Also, a very delicate note. We have had a few incidents recently with small items. Bracelets, cufflinks. I'm sure nothing intentional, but I need everyone to know we are vigilant. There will be additional security. Please do not be offended if your bags are checked at the end of your shift." It would have been fine if she had stopped there. She did not. She looked at me, then at Nia, then at Luis, like her eyes were a net with holes big enough to drive a truck through, but small enough to tangle your foot. "We're all family here," she said. "Honesty is everything to us. I'm sure you understand." Naya went still beside the refrigerator. Luis's jaw moved once and then stopped. Lacey looked at her clipboard like it might save her from the discomfort of choosing a side. After the meeting, I took Scout for a walk. The dog and I climbed the hill as the sun slid down the street and made the parked cars look like they had opinions. At the top of the block, Mr. Patel was pruning the lemon tree, talking softly about not taking too much from anyone, even a tree. I asked him if he would be here the night of the party. He smiled. "I'm the only person who can tell the lanterns no," he said. "So yes." He looked at me then the way older men look at their daughters when they know gooseflesh has nothing to do with wind. "You will be fine," he said. "I am always fine," I said. "You are always collected," he said. "That is not the same thing." On Saturday, the city woke to a sky so crisp it felt laundered. The crew arrived at noon, the band at 3, bartenders polished stems. The florist rearranged his arrangements like a man who trusts only his future regrets. Lacey wore a headset and a smile you could peel off in one strip. Marco stood at the front door with 2 additional guards, one with a thick neck and one with a long memory. At 5 o'clock, Vivian drifted into the kitchen. "Maggie," she said, "the silver in the dining room has fingerprints. Can you fix it now, before anyone sees?" Her voice had the sugar people add when they want you to do something they should have noticed earlier. The dining room could seat 20 under a ceiling painted with stars that had never met a telescope. I wiped forks and listened to the house wake up. In the library, Peter was rehearsing a toast. In the courtyard, a woman from Los Angeles explained to a man from Dubai why San Francisco would always be the future. In the foyer, Vivian laughed the way women laugh when their friends are late and their enemies are on time. At 6:30, the guests arrived like weather. The band found its footing. The servers moved like choreography. I could tell who had money, even when it wasn't obvious. There is a way a person stands when he knows his whims can become other people's work. Emma stood beside me in the pantry in a black dress and sneakers, tying on an apron and pushing her hair off her forehead with the back of her wrist. "Aunt Em," she whispered, "this place looks like a movie." "It is a movie," I said. "Everybody's playing themselves." At 7, Dylan came through the kitchen with a tray of champagne and almost dropped it when he saw Emma. They whisper-laughed and looked like all the hope in the world had just learned to walk. He had, indeed, the kind of face teachers have when they have not yet been told to pick between inspiration and paperwork. He squeezed my hand when he said hello, and I put him on my list of things to be grateful for when the power goes out. 9 o'clock was the hour everything broke. It always is. In the dining room, someone's laughter cracked into complaint. In the library, Peter's toast ran long and thin. In the foyer, a photographer braced a flash against his shoulder like a weapon and took a picture of a woman inspiring a dress to do too much. In the kitchen, a server tripped and caught himself on the counter and saved the tray, and I wanted to throw a parade for him. Vivian called for silence. Her dress was the kind of white that makes people afraid to breathe near it. She stood at the top of the stairs and raised a glass and thanked the right people and almost forgot to thank the staff, but remembered in time to make it more graceless. She made a joke about how the house runs on magic and Maggie and her crew, and I did not look at anyone. Then the journalist asked Peter about the rumored tax bill in Sacramento, and somebody asked where Vivian had bought her earrings, and a young founder in a hoodie bragged to a director of philanthropy about being generous before the exit, not after. And a waiter named Derek cut through the crowd with a tray of oysters and a look on his face like tomorrow would be kinder. I was in the pantry refilling water when Lacey appeared in the doorway with eyes that had turned into ideas. Her headset was crooked. "Maggie," she said, "I need you in the study." "I'm helping the servers rotate," I said, but she had already disappeared. The study was just off the library, a small room with leather chairs and books no one read. When I stepped inside, Marco was there, and another guard, and Vivian. On the desk lay a velvet box with a space where something sparkled until it didn't. Vivian's smile had been packed away. "I'm sure this is a misunderstanding," she said. "We're missing a bracelet. It's vintage. It means a lot to me. One of the guests thinks she saw you in here earlier." "I was in here 3 hours ago," I said, wiping that table, and I pointed to a side table where a glass had gone sweating on the varnish and left no ring because I know how to move a coaster without making a man feel guilty. Marco cleared his throat. He would have preferred to be anywhere else. "Maggie, would you mind showing us your bag? It's just easiest." "That seems best," Vivian said, with the relief of a person whose solution is always the same: make somebody smaller, quickly. There is a line in every night where you decide what story you will be living when you wake up. Most of us miss it. Most of us are busy being good or being tired. I took a breath and set my spine. "Of course, officer," I said to Marco, because I wanted the other guard to know who in the room had ever made a decision with consequences. I set my bag on the desk. It held a notebook, a wallet, a phone, a roll of blue tape, a pack of mint gum, 2 pairs of gloves, and a photo of Emma when she was 4, wearing a crown of plastic daisies and purple snow boots in July. The guard took his time, and the velvet box looked like a lie. When he finished, there was nothing on his face. "All clear," he said. Vivian crossed her arms. "We'll need to check everyone," she said, even though "we" meant Marco and "everyone" meant the visible. "And after that?" I asked. "What do you mean?" she said. "After you look through all the lunch pails and lipstick bags," I said. "What will you do with what that says about you?" Vivian looked past me at the books. People always do when they need to pretend they like thinking. "I will know I protected my family," she said. "That's all any of us are doing." "Some of us are polishing your silver," I said, and Marco's mouth twitched into a grim smile he stuffed behind his professionalism. Lacey appeared with Nia and Luis and Derek and 3 others in a little train of apology. Bags were unzipped. Lives were inspected. The velvet box sat like a dare. The bracelet did not reappear, because life is not a sitcom, and liars are not efficient. After 15 minutes of theater, I walked out into the hallway with my empty hands and looked down the long staircase and saw Peter at the bottom telling a joke he told every year, and laughing like that made it new. I turned left instead of right and went up the back stairs to the small office where the house printer lived. I closed the door behind me and took my phone from my pocket and called a number I never call at night. "North Harbor," a man's voice said after the second ring. "Gabe speaking." "Hi, Gabe," I said. "It's Margaret. I need you at the house." "Now?" he said. "Is everything all right?" "It will be," I said. "Bring the lease. Bring the amendments. Bring the letter we sent about property taxes." "I know the one," he said. "Give me 20. "You've got 12, I said, and hung up. I stood in the quiet and listened to the hum of the printer and the voices falling into the stairwell like coins into a jar. I watched the smallest spider I have ever seen cross the windowsill like it knew it had no time to waste. I thought about the math I have done in my life and the math this moment required. How much dignity to spend and how much truth to hold back, and when to fold the paper that is your patience and put it in somebody's pocket, knowing it will get wrinkled. Then I went downstairs and handed a towel to a server without any napkins left and smiled at a guest who told me the bathroom was out of hand towels, as if I were the bathroom's mother. In the library, Peter clinked a glass again. "Friends?" he said, too loud and not enough. "We want to do something fun. Vivian has an idea." Vivian smiled the smile you give a camera before you tell the world you invented kindness. "We want to play a game," she said. "It's called Worth." She explained that anyone could come up and say one thing they think is worth more than money, and at the end, the crowd would raise money for a charity she liked, and she would match it. Everyone loved it immediately because nothing delights some people more than the opportunity to applaud themselves for noticing other people's needs. The first person said time. The second said health. Peter said time and health and my wife, because the third slot is for jokes. Vivian said honesty, and 3 people clapped with their rings. The journalist said privacy, and somebody asked if that was irony. The former secretary said service, and people nodded like this was church, and he was a line they had planned to memorize. Derek brushed past me and whispered, "This room is going to choke on itself," and I whispered, "Keep moving. The air stays clear if you do." Gabe arrived at the front door at 10:05, wearing a jacket he saves for court. He is 35, with a face like the inside of a friendly book and a brain that learned early how to stand still in a storm. I met him in the foyer where the orchids had finally been left alone. He held a binder under his arm and an envelope with my name on it in his breast pocket. He said, "Tell me where you want to be standing when you say whatever you're about to say." "Not on the stairs," I said. "I am not a queen. I think the library." He looked over my shoulder. "There are a lot of very expensive opinions in there." "I have owned a lot of very expensive opinions," I said. "They tend to depreciate when you turn the lights on." Gabe pushed open the library doors when Vivian was coaxing a CEO to say "my mother" into the microphone like he had just invented gratitude. The crowd turned its face like a sunflower when the doors sighed. I walked in behind Gabe and felt 90 pairs of eyes do what eyes do when they suddenly remember that service workers have names. Marco stood at the back and lifted his chin a fraction, and that was all the permission I needed. "Vivian," I said gently, as if I were reminding a friend the sugar was in the blue bowl, not the white. "May I say something?" She hesitated, and then remembered she had invented benevolence 2 minutes ago. "Of course," she said, offering the microphone with the nonchalance of a person who thinks a microphone is always her friend. I took it in both hands and made sure it was on. I have spoken into a lot of microphones. The trick is not the words. The trick is knowing your silence is the most credible thing you own. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Margaret Hale. Most of you know me as Maggie. I tidy your glasses and your conscience." 2 people laughed because they laugh when nervous. 2 others laughed because they were kind. "I have listened tonight to a word I like very much," I said. "Honesty." A murmur that could not decide who it wanted to be moved through the room. "An hour ago," I continued, "I was asked to open my bag because something expensive went missing. Everyone working in this house was asked to do the same. I agreed because I have nothing to hide, and because sometimes the shortest way through a room is to let somebody embarrass themselves. Marco coughed a sound that learned it wasn't supposed to be a laugh. I nodded toward him, toward the staff, toward the place where Lacey had chosen to stand so she could exit either direction. I think it is important for me to say something plainly, I said. I am not hurt. I am not mad. I am not fragile. I am tired. I smiled in a way that let people know they were not invited to help. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, I said, is bring a light into a room that prefers flattery to clarity. I looked at Gabe and he laid the binder on the piano like music. 6 months ago, a trust I manage purchased this home, I said. Its name is North Harbor. You have never heard of it because it does not want to be heard of. It is not a brand. It pays the gardener on time. It asks the HVAC to change filters even when nobody is coughing. It does not go to parties. It goes to bed. When that trust bought this house, it leased it back to Drummond House LLC under terms both parties agreed to. I paused and let the sentence stand up straight. I am the controlling member of that trust. The room did what silence does when it discovers itself. It settled on the furniture and found the corners. One woman reached for her necklace to prove there was something her hands could do. Vivian's face did not move. Peter's did. He replaced one expression with another and then found he had run out. He said, "What are you talking about?" in a voice that sounded like somebody else had loans he did not remember signing. I gestured gently to the piano. "Here is the lease you signed, Peter, and here is the addendum you initialed in June, agreeing to a temporary rent reduction during the backyard construction, which I granted because you asked politely, and because I am not a person who says no when yes is affordable." I laid my hand on the second folder and watched Gabe's fingers stop as if they wanted to applaud their own restraint. "And here," I said, "is the letter we sent last month advising that unpaid property taxes will result in penalties if not addressed by October 1st. You may not have seen it. Sometimes a house has many baskets, and only one of them catches what matters." Peter blinked. "Our accountant handles that," he said. This is not the time." "No," I said, "the time was 30 minutes ago, when a room full of people who own more forks than weekends arranged to be entertained by the idea of virtue, while the people who ensure your glasses do not go thirsty were being frisked. Something, pity or respect or terror, moved through the staff behind me and unrolled like a rug. I looked at Vivian. "I do not particularly care about your bracelet," I said. "I suspect you set it down somewhere you will pretend to have invented later. What I care about is the air in this room." I turned to the guests. "Some of you are brilliant," I said. "Some of you are very kind. Some of you confuse momentum with meaning. And some of you are better people when nobody is looking than you are right now." Dylan stared at me like someone had lifted a roof off his life and showed him a sky he had not known he needed. Emma's eyes were wet and fierce and proud. "This house," I said, softer now, "is mine. I let you live here because you pay on time and because I believe in rental markets that do not start a war. But it is mine in a deeper sense, too. I paid for it with years of doing math nobody thanked me for, and with mornings when I woke to a bed that was too big for one person, and I made it anyway and went to work. I paid for it with a lifetime of listening to people explain themselves. I do not need to be in this room. I choose to be. That is power, the only kind I will claim." Vivian found her voice like a coin in a coat pocket. "You lied to us," she said. "You played house." "No," I said. "You did. I cleaned it." The journalist took a half step forward, which is what journalists do when they smell a story. He held up his hands like a man soothing a dog. "Miss Hale, are you saying you took a job here to... what? To spy?" "I took a job here to write a book," I said. "A book about who we are when we have what we want. About how often our decency is available for purchase and how often it is not." A woman near the fireplace, who had not laughed at any of the jokes, smiled without showing teeth. Peter tried the legal lane. "This is an invasion of privacy," he said. "An abuse of position. You can ask your lawyer to reread the lease," I said, "particularly the part about access during events for the purposes of safety and oversight." I looked at Marco. In my capacity as owner, I'm asking security to suspend bag checks of staff immediately unless SFPD is involved, which it is not. It is not, Marco said from the back, like a man who has been waiting his whole life to confirm a sensible sentence. Thank you, I said. Also, everyone working tonight will be paid double for the final 2 hours. North Harbor will cover it. I'm asking Chef Luis to take a break and sit in the courtyard for 10 minutes with a glass of water. I'm asking Nia to put down the trays and pick up a chair. I am asking Derek to breathe. I am asking the band to play one song only for the staff, something they like. The band leader blinked. Then he grinned. We like to play what we like to play, he said, and launched into a riff that made the room remember it had a pulse. Vivian looked as if someone had told her elegance had gone out of style while she was sleeping. This is our home, she said. You can't just... It is our agreement, I said. You can honor it or you cannot. But you cannot tell me to respect a room that has decided it enjoys humiliation as entertainment. She trembled and bottled it as poise. You came here to trick us. No, I said. I came here to see you. You introduced yourselves. The staff gathered near the French doors. Luis leaned his head back and closed his eyes like he was catching rain. Nia reached for Emma's hand and squeezed it, and Emma squeezed back. Marco took off his earpiece and let it hang, and I watched his shoulders settle like furniture that had finally reached the floor. The journalist asked a question he pretended was neutral. Why reveal this now? Because sometimes, I said, the truth behaves like an ambulance. It makes its own right of way. I handed the microphone back to Vivian. She did not take it. Peter did. He looked at me the way boys look at cliffs. He wanted to jump and he wanted not to jump, and he did not know yet that he had already fallen. He said, "We apologize to anyone who felt targeted. That was not our intent." He said, "Maggie has been an invaluable member of our team." And I smiled at the word and filed it with the others. He said, "This is a misunderstanding we can handle internally." Here's a small suggestion, I said pleasantly, because nothing unhooks a trap like a voice that refuses to use its teeth. Handle it externally. Start with the driveway. Thank every person who leaves. Send them home with something more than a tip envelope. Send them with respect. And when you get your bracelet back from the drawer where you left it, tell Lacey you found it, and tell the staff you found yourself feeling a little ashamed. The room was not sure where to put its hands. The band played something the staff liked anyway. Nia tugged Emma into the courtyard, and they danced with their aprons on. Luis danced a little, and then sat down again and drank his water and rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. Derek laughed like it had been let out of a box. Mr. Patel stood at the edge of the lemon tree and nodded to it as if to say, "See, we held." I walked through the library with Gabe at my elbow and made my way to the back hallway where the paella pans lived when they were not busy. He said, "You were gentler than I would have been." I am old enough to know I do not need to shout to be heard, I said. I am also old enough to know that shouting feels good sometimes. "You didn't shout," he said. "I did not," I said, and felt my heartbeat settle into the hands I use for polishing. At midnight, the guests left like weather in reverse. The room exhaled. The rental company began to unhook things that had pretended to be permanent. Vivian had disappeared into the primary bedroom and shut the door. Peter tried to approach me twice and did not make it past his own reflection. In the kitchen, I helped stack plates. In the courtyard, the lemon tree watched us the way trees do, which is to say, without judgment, but with memory. Emma walked home with me down Broadway, the fog returning to swallow money and mistakes with equal appetite. She hooked her arm in mine. "You scare me sometimes," she said. "In the good way, you know, the way that makes me want to be something I haven't been yet." "You are already someone I'm glad to know," I said. She laughed. "Dylan said you reminded him of his favorite teacher in high school, the one who told him to be decent when nobody was watching, and he didn't realize that was algebra until later." "I like him," I said. "He matches you." We turned onto Fillmore, where the bakery still had yesterday's baguettes in the window, and a man slept on a piece of cardboard with his shoes under his head as a pillow. I paused. I always do. The city does not know how to be only one thing. That is both its problem and its promise. "Do you think Vivian will hate you forever?" Emma asked after a block of silence. "I think she will hate me until she learns to hate something else about herself less," I said. which might be never, or Monday. Grief is unpredictable, and so is humility. We reached my flat, and I made tea, though it was far too late for it. We sat at the table and took our shoes off, and Emma put her head on her arms like she used to when she was 10 and had done the right thing and was tired from it. When she left to catch the last bus back to Oakland, I washed 2 cups with the care I give the first thing I do after I make a decision I cannot undo. Then I went to sleep and dreamed about lemon trees. On Sunday, I walked down to Fort Mason and watched the water shrug at the shore. A man with a gray beard and 2 jackets sat on a bench and fed seagulls with the precision of a surgeon. He wore a cap from a ship I remembered from a news story 15 years ago. He looked at me like men look at their daughters when they have not been given a daughter in real life, but were handed wisdom anyway. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," I said. "I like your hat." "I earned it," he said, and laughed at himself like that is both a glory and a warning. "You look like a woman who told the truth too loud last night." "Is that a look?" I asked. "It is after 60, he said. "Sit." I sat. He passed me half a bagel, and we both pretended it was not stale. "If you can tell me the truth without names," he said, "I can tell you if you were wrong." I pretended to be smaller than I am, I said. "People stepped on me. I measured it. Then I stood up." He nodded like he had done that aboard a ship with a storm that did not know how to be moderate. "Sounds like a good experiment," he said. "Sometimes the only way to find out who somebody is to give them a chance to be worse." "I gave them a chance," I said. "They were eager to take it." He tossed a piece of bagel to a gull who missed it by a foot and looked offended. "I used to think the job was to keep good records of what other people had done to me," he said. "Then I figured out the job is to keep good records of what I do after they do it." "What did you do?" I asked. "Quit drinking," he said. "Got a different view of the same ocean. It turns out you can't punish a wave for being a wave, but you also don't have to live where it breaks on your neck." I smiled. "What's your name?" "Cal," he said. "Thank you, Cal," I said. "You bet, Margaret," he said, and I did not ask how he knew my name. People watch. The good ones do it to take care. On Monday morning, Gabe texted to say a wire had hit the tax office. I said, "Thank you." And he said, "They transferred more than was due." And I said, "People who are afraid of being embarrassed again often overpay." He said, "Will you renew their lease when it's up?" And I said, "I never decide anything on a Monday." And then I added, "Probably, because it is easier to change a culture from a chair than from a sidewalk." Vivian did not call. Peter sent a message through Lacey asking for a reset, and I replied with a written notice requiring a new policy regarding searches, a bonus for staff at the end of the year, and a formal apology delivered in person to every employee who had to unzip their life. 3 days later, they did it. Vivian's voice had the shape of contrition, but not its temperature. It does not matter. Apologies are less about the past than the present's willingness to be supervised. That week, Nia tucked a note into my pocket when she passed me the lemon oil. It said, "I almost quit. You made staying feel like not losing." Luis handed me a container of pozole and told me it was too spicy for anyone else. Derek asked if I knew where he could print a resume, and I said, "My house has a printer that has been practicing for a purpose." And he laughed. Saturday morning, Emma knocked on my door with a bag of peaches and a face that had slept. "Dylan's parents want to meet you," she said. "Can we make dinner here? They will bring honey." "I will make roast chicken," I said. The kind people think is complicated and is in fact exactly like telling the truth carefully twice. I set the table with plates that had chips where memories lived, and Emma arranged the peaches in a bowl and then ruined the arrangement and then fixed it in a way that made her laugh. Dylan's parents arrived with honey in a jar with a label that looked handmade because it was. His mother hugged me like Midwesterners hug, which is to say, as if everything good that ever happened met at your collarbone. His father asked me about football, and I said something about the Browns that made him snort. Over dinner, they told me about bees. They told me about how a hive has a personality and how you can tell when a queen is tired. They told me how you do not steal honey, you borrow it, and promise to return something the bees will recognize as a favor. Dylan told me about a 9th grader who had never read an entire book until he read one about a boy who builds a raft and the way the boy laughed out loud when he realized the raft could be his life. I told them that once, in a boardroom, I watched a man lose $10 million in one presentation, and still the thing he cared about was how he looked when he stood up and left. I told them the best thing I ever did was teach a young analyst to tell me I was wrong. I told them sometimes the smartest thing you can do is ask the gardener about the lemons. After they left, Emma helped me do the dishes and then sat at the table with her ankles crossed. "Do you think people can change?" she asked. "I think people can grow," I said. Change is a word that thinks it is special. Growth is a word that shows up on time. She nodded and then put her hand over mine. "I was proud of you," she said, "at the party." "I was proud of me too," I said, because women are allowed to say that out loud when they have earned it. On Tuesday, Lacey handed me an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a card printed on thick paper. It said, "With gratitude for your service." And there was a gift card to a store that sells towels so expensive they come with their own self-esteem. There was also a handwritten note from Peter. It said, "Thank you for your candor. We will do better." There was nothing from Vivian. That was also a kind of note. On Wednesday morning, I found Vivian in the kitchen wearing sweatpants and an expensive t-shirt. No cameras, no guests. Her hair in a ponytail like a woman trying out a life. She held a cup of coffee the way people hold things when they want their hands to have a purpose. "Maggie," she said and cleared her throat. "Margaret, may I ask you something?" "You may ask me anything," I said. "Did you always plan to humiliate me?" she asked. "No," I said, "I always planned to keep your house clean. You provided the rest." She flinched and then laughed a little through her nose, which I had not seen her do. "I don't know how to be someone else," she said softly. "You don't need to be someone else," I said. "You need to be yourself without an audience." She stared at the lemon on the counter like it might write her a note. "My mother cleaned houses," she said, and it explained nothing and everything at once. She used to bring home things people threw away, and we would polish them, and for one day the house would feel like it was made of more than effort. "Give your staff a raise," I said. "It is better than a candlestick." She nodded. "Done." "Start with Nia," I said. "Then Luis, then Mr. Patel. Marco will not ask. Give him more anyway." She looked at me as if I had offered her a map to a city she had only seen in brochures. "Okay," she said. "Okay." "Also," I said, "find your bracelet." She blinked. "It was in my gym bag," she said. "I found it Sunday morning. I am not telling the story. It is too embarrassing." "Humility has already been served," I said. "You may eat as much as you like." She smiled for the first time all year, like a person who had not been photographed. A month later, the house felt different. Not heroic, not transformed, but different. Apologies had been made. Raises had been given. Lacey quit and became a project manager at a company that made software to keep boutique hotels' lighting agreeable, which I found poetic enough to let alone. A new house manager named Terrence arrived with a laugh like a porch swing and a calendar that included staff birthdays. Vivian started leaving her phone in a drawer for 2 hours a day. Peter learned to take a plate to the sink. The world did not end. On a Friday in November, I made a choice. I wrote a letter to North Harbor's board, me and a second me who likes to play devil's advocate, and proposed we establish a fund to pay for emergency childcare and dental work for any staff at any property we own. It wasn't big, not compared to the money that flies around rooms and tries to land without making a mess. It was, however, immediate. It is astonishing how often the difference between a person's collapse and a person's capacity is $300 on the right day. The next week, Derek printed his resume at my house and took a job at a small wine bar where the owner said please with his eyes. Nia finished midterms and looked like a woman who would not be quiet on purpose. Luis asked me if I wanted to learn to roll gnocchi and said it was like counting with your hands. Emma and Dylan put down a deposit on a one-bedroom in Oakland with windows that were not afraid of daylight. She wants to teach middle school science, Emma said. He wants to keep thinking ninth graders are miracles. We are going to buy a couch nobody would make us feel careless about spilling on. In December, I took the bus down to the Embarcadero with a thermos of coffee and a book. Cal was on his bench feeding gulls bagels that were too fresh for their dignity. He saluted me with his paper cup. "How's the empire?" he asked. "Less of an empire," I said. "More of a garden." He nodded. "Harder to brag about," he said. "More work. Better shade." We sat without talking for a long time. The bay looked like it was thinking about what it had seen. A boy with a skateboard jumped and didn't land and jumped and did. A woman ran with her dog and they shared the same breath for 3 steps. A ferry moaned and someone on board put their hand on the window like it might remember them. I do not pretend that a single night in a library rewired a city. I do not believe rooms change for long because a microphone made them flinch. But I do believe this: the math of dignity is cumulative. The ledger remembers. If enough people refuse to enter rooms where decency is optional, those rooms will become very quiet and then very empty, and then something else will move into the space that knows how to use its chairs. On New Year's Eve, I wrote the last chapter of my book. I wrote about being 23 and watching the twin flames of anxiety and ambition light everything I touched. I wrote about meeting Ben, my firefighter, who once took a cat down a ladder and cried when nobody saw. I wrote about the day he did not come home and the way the city sounded like 300 million people whispering stay. I wrote about Emma sleeping on my couch after her mother left and how we made pancakes for dinner and pretended that was on purpose. I wrote about North Harbor because sometimes a little hidden structure is the kindest thing you can place under a life. And I wrote about a lemon tree that listened. I printed a draft on my old machine and set it on the table with a cup of tea. I ran my hand over the top page like a blessing. I thought about all the rooms I have stood in, quiet or loud, and what I had learned that was worth more than money. I had learned that the person who brings the water knows where the bodies are buried and where the extra napkins live, and how to keep a secret without selling it. I had learned that humiliation is not entertainment, even when it sells. I had learned that I can choose what I keep small. My temper, my appetite for revenge, my presence, if I wish, but not my courage, not my voice in the moments when silence makes me an accomplice. In mid-January, the Drummonds renewed their lease. They asked for 3 years, and I said, 2. And they said, we were going to say 2. And I smiled at my lawyer through the phone because we both knew everyone feels better when they donate their own concession to the charity of shared pretense. A week later, I put on my cotton dress and my rubber-soled shoes and went back to work. I carried a silver bucket down the marble hallway, and the chandeliers smiled because that is their job. The house smelled like ginger and lemon oil because work had been done. Terrence asked Luis about his mother. Peter scraped his plate into the trash himself and did it wrong, and then did it right. Vivian walked into the kitchen wearing jeans and asked me how to get lemon oil out of a sleeve, and when I told her, she said thank you without adding anything extra. At noon, Mrs. Patel, the gardener's wife, whom I had only met once, came to the back gate with a bag of mandarins her neighbor had given her. "For tea," she said shyly, and I said, "Yes, for tea," and we both knew what we meant was for company. That night, after the dishwasher sighed and Scout snored and the city tucked itself in, I stepped out into the courtyard to look up. The air had the taste of the ocean going to bed. The lemon tree rested, leaves still, roots deep. I put my hand on the trunk like a promise and whispered. We held. On my way home, I stopped by a coffee shop that is open too late for its own health and ordered a decaf like a coward. At the counter, the barista, a girl with a ring in her ear shaped like a comma, asked me if I was getting off work, and I said yes, and she said, "You smell like lemon," and I said, "Good." And we smiled at each other like people who can tell a room the truth and go home and sleep anyway. I am not a hero in this story. That is important to say. I am a woman who grew tired of watching people pretend. I am a woman who knows the weight of a silver bucket and the weight of a microphone and the difference between them. I am a woman who owns a house and a voice and uses both carefully. When I was a girl in Ohio, my father used to play a game at the dinner table. He would say, "What did you learn today that you didn't know yesterday?" And my sister and I would compete not to sound like we had coasted. On the night of the library, I learned that a room full of successful people can be reminded of their shared obligations with a sentence and a look and a pause. On the morning at Fort Mason, I learned that old sailors and seagulls keep better records than most of us. And on the Tuesday Vivian found her bracelet in the gym bag, I learned that sometimes misplacing a thing is safer than misplacing your self-respect, and that if you can choose, always choose the thing. There is one more thing to tell you because stories want to end with a bow, and life rarely hands you one. In late spring, I got a letter in the mail that smelled like perfume you wear when you travel, so you can remember you were good to yourself once in a different zip code. It was from Vivian's mother. Inside was a photo of a woman in a house dress in the 70s, standing on a porch with a broom, her hand on her hip, not smiling. The note said, "I have always been proud of my daughter for making a life that looks nothing like mine. I am prouder this week than I have been for some time. Thank you. R." I put the photo in my green tin with my mother's recipes. I do not know if Vivian has seen it. I do not need to. The bow is not mine to tie. A month later, Emma and Dylan were married in a park in Oakland, under a tree that would have offered shade, even if it had not been asked. The ceremony was short. The vows were words people can keep without lying. They danced to a song about cities forgiving you for leaving and forgiving you for staying. Dylan's parents brought honey, and his mother whispered to me that bees know the difference between real danger and pretend, and I said, "So do women who own houses," and she laughed and squeezed my hand. That night, after everyone had gone and the tree had decided to keep us in its memory, Emma took my face in both her hands and said, "Thank you for showing me how to be someone unafraid." And I said, "Thank you for making me someone needed," and we cried without fuss and cleaned up paper plates. When I got home, I sat by the window with a glass of water and watched the street. A man walked his dog, and the dog pretended it had never seen a hydrant. A couple argued about furniture and then kissed like furniture is just a place to sit and not a religion. Somewhere, in a large house with a lemon tree, a woman took off a bracelet and set it in a bowl and went to sleep without checking her phone first. I turned the light off. The room knew me. There are houses you own and houses that own you, and nights when the line is a ribbon you tie around your own wrist to remind you your pulse is yours. Tomorrow there will be silver to polish. Tomorrow there will be math to do, how much patience to spend, how much quiet to let breathe, how much courage to carry to the library in case anyone asks about Worth again. Tomorrow there will be mandarins for tea. Tomorrow there will be a bench at Fort Mason where a man named Cal will feed gulls poorly, and the gulls will love him anyway. I will wake before dawn because I am that kind of woman, and I will put on my rubber-soled shoes and my cotton dress with deep pockets and tuck a notebook into one, and I will go down the marble hallway toward whatever needs me. The chandeliers will perform their gorgeous job, but the light will come from the windows. The dog will thump his tail on the tile. The city will decide to be more than it was yesterday. And in the middle of it all, a 62-year-old woman who owns a mansion and an unembarrassed voice will carry a silver bucket and a sentence that is a promise, both polished enough to see yourself in. We held.